Good day, brothers and sisters. Have you signed up for this channel? Yes, you have. But don't forget to share, and share it and make sure people subscribe and click likes and put it on your socials and whatever you want to put it, because this is the greatest thing since, well, whatever your favorite thing that you discovered recently, we are your new next favorite thing. Long story short, the reason why you're tuning in into this show is to reach next level of discernment. And discernment is good. And it comes to you when you're in touch with the Spirit and when the Spirit present within your life. Whatever that means, we can chew it out for you. But what else that means is there's a lot of information out there, especially in the legacy media sources. And if you listen to them, they sound very serious. And language matters. And they're very convincing when they're telling you things and when you're asking you things and like, how about this? How about that? And what about this? So I don't know if you guys watched this interview with the president of Azerbaijan. He was being interviewed by this interesting lady from BBC and how he repelled her efforts to undermine, because it's like, well, basically the interview was centered around him not being a leader of the free country and that the country is corrupt. Just like, well, England isn't corrupt, let's not forget Boris Johnson's and all his COVID parties, like Biden isn't and his family isn't corrupt. And if you are anti-Trump, like Trump isn't corrupt, right? If that's your thing, right? So let's just watch this video really quick. There's a lot of good, juicy things in it.
Why do you think that people in Azerbaijan do not have free media and opposition?
Because this is what I'm told by independent sources in this country.
Which independent sources?
Many independent sources.
Tell me which.
I certainly couldn't name sources.
Oh, if you couldn't name, that means that you're just inventing the story.
So you're saying the media is not under state control?
Not at all.
I mean, NGOs are the subject of a crackdown. Journalists are the subject of a crackdown.
Not at all.
Critics are in jail.
No, not at all.
None of this is true.
Absolutely fake. Absolutely. We have free media. We have free internet. And the number of internet users in Azerbaijan is more than 80%. Can you imagine the restriction of media in a country where internet is free?
Yeah, I can. Bill C-11. In Canada, if your brothers and sisters not familiar with BC-11, Google it. But we did a show on Bill C-11. Basically, now you cannot play shows like ours on... and Glenn, it's true. This is the issue we're going to encounter here in Canada because we're covering news with our roundtable. We now cannot post our stuff on social media because social media need to pay somehow. There's some kind of pay-to-play thing to be able to play news sources and all that stuff. So apparently there's going to be, and also they can steer you into watching some stuff they want you to see, including like not watch our show. And if you are paying attention and if you live in the United States, Restrict Act based, you use TikTok is the is the catalyst to start talking about Restrict Act, but Restrict Act is basically Patriot Act 2.0. If you read the whole thing, it's pretty horrific in terms of your internet freedoms. Oh, let's listen to this.
There is no censorship, and there are 80% of internet users. This is again a biased approach. This is an attempt to create a perception in Western audience about Azerbaijan. We have opposition, we have NGOs, we have free political activity, we have free media, we have freedom of speech. But if you raise this question...
It's more that you can say about Canada, by the way. He just said, remember how Trudeau specifically treated Rebel News? And I should have had this piece. How he's like, you're not even, as far as I'm concerned, you're not even the media, he told them. Remember, Glenn? And it's like, I'm not answering your question because, I haven't been prepped by my media handlers to answer your question. And I'm not ready because there's a lot of truth in your questions.
Yeah, it's like Trudeau is going to dictate what the real media is after he had to pay the media here in Canada up to $600 billion, money.
Press release, right?
Can I ask you also one? How do you assess what happened to Mr. Assange? Is it a reflection of free media in your country? Let's talk about Assange. How many years he spent in Ecuadorian embassy? And for what? And where is he now? For journalistic activity. You kept that person hostage, actually killing him morally and physically. You did it, not us, and now he's in prison. So you have no moral right to talk about free media when you do these things. Why do you think
Good
that?
for you.
That's the BBC, the British Broadcasting. And I'm watching this now after watching how Andrew Tate gave his first interview out of jail to the BBC. And he basically is telling the same thing that this gentleman is here.
You remember what he said? It's like, we hear because of me, not because of you. You hear asking me questions. I'm in control. I'm in charge, not you.
Yeah, she tried to run everything, and he had to remind her. I said, look, you're here because I'm the one who's well known. People want to know about me. They don't want to know about you, and they already have a distrust about you. And secondly, we're going to have a conversation here. She didn't want to answer any of his questions, but he says, may I remind you, you're in my house, so I expect you to have a certain amount of respect for me too.
Well, it's the same story as the whole Trump story. I'm just going to cover it really quick. Trump gets indicted. But even before that, I remember back in Russian collusion when the Russian 17 agencies have this. And how dare you ask us? But yeah, they have irrefutable proof that Trump is so corrupt and he colluded with the Russians to get elected and all this other stuff. But don't ask us questions. But in reverse, we have Biden paying taxes on paying taxes, like you said. Thank God he at least paid taxes on that $10 million that he cannot account for, what he got it for and where from. And then we know he has evidence now. We have evidence now that him and his son got paid $5 million each, which correlates with that. We know that FBI has the records of that, including that the guy who paid them, he has the telephone records recorded, right? So we actually have a refutable proof of some sort, but we still say allegedly. But allegedly, Glenn, do you know, brothers and sisters, are you aware that United States are still in Syria? And under what pretenses? Do you know, brothers and sisters? Glenn, take that story, run with it.
Yeah, most people don't know, but the United Snakes of America have military over there in Syria, in the northeast part of Syria, where it's a very oil-rich portion of the country. And they seem to be on the QT, but they're taking all the oil from that country and making money, the proceeds of selling this oil to other countries.
And how did we find out about that? Was it by accident? Unfortunate accident. Actually, the helicopter crashed and killed, 22 people?
Yeah, 22 people, 12 soldiers got hurt pretty bad, but 10 had to be flown out of there for really bad, the big treatment that they're going to need to get better. And this was all under the QT. You probably won't find this on the Clown News Network or the Clinton News Network, also known as the Criminal News Network.
But I would put Fox News into it. I don't know. You wouldn't hear it from Fox News. I'm curious if Tucker will cover this story. And, we talk about Ukraine and how dare Russia encroach on Ukrainian, freedoms and independence and whatever. That's a horrible story, right? Russians are awful at this. But then you have an article here. Clearly, Americans are in Syria still, and they are pumping oil. They're protecting oil rigs. And I can only assume what are the rigs of, where's the oil going? It's definitely not going to Syrians. You have Turkey close by. You have Israel, who doesn't have their own oil. So we can only assume. It's an open-ended question. There's more evidence of things like this, but you can actually look into it yourself. This is not the purpose of the show. The purpose of the show to bring your attention to the fact that Americans right now, it's a what do they call tea cattle calling pot black?
There's under the Constitution, there's supposed to be no foreign entanglements. Here, the people of the United States are not even aware that they still have a branch of the military out in that's foreign occupation of another country. You don't have the right to do that. That's against the United Nations Geneva Convention, and yet this still just goes on because the rule of law doesn't apply to the globalists, and they're using the military might of the United States of America to go and do these nefarious things in other countries around the world. Meanwhile, Americans' way of life is being taken away from them.
Deteriorating, and everything's crumbling. The point is right. What's good for the goose, bad for the gander. How you say that? The point is, brothers and sisters, are you aware of things like this happening? Are you aware now because you're watching Alex Sass show with Glenn Herring at the Glenn Zone? Don't forget to click those subscribe buttons. I'll remind you second time while you're watching this, because I know you're watching this up to this point, because we're very interested. Interesting. So the point is, Glenn, I know you also made another prediction, and I asked you many times, where do you think this Ukrainian conflict is going? And this is probably going to be an ongoing thing. And if it is an ongoing thing, then the whole idea is that the Putin and Russia in this all together, like with the globalists, possibly, because now they're talking about buffer zone, which you predicted it, Glenn.
Yeah, just like North and South Korea, there's a demilitarized zone. That's to keep the enemies, so-called enemies, away from each other. I believe that's what the whole point of the Russian incursion into Ukraine is all about.
So it is to prolong conflict, and it is also showing the point that the Russia never meant to go west beyond this point. They just wanted to liberate the Russian territories or whatever, I don't know, Russian-speaking populations that have been under attack since 2014.
Yeah, keep the Russian side to Russia and let the other side, which seems to be labeled more of a Nazi side, well, let them stay with the West.
By the way, speaking of Nazis, Putin blasts Kiev reverence towards Nazi collaborators. The Russian head of state says he is surprised Vladimir Zelensky's support for neo-Nazis and of Jewish origin. It is very surprising, right? Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin from public square, they removed him from the public square. And replace him with the Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera, who he called a scoundrel and a fascist. And it's true, Stepan Bandera was on the side of the Nazis. He was the collaborator at that time. And I don't know if Chrystia Freeland is related to him in any ways, but she's really deep into that. She went to the Ukraine with fearless leader Justin Trudeau. Glenn, did you see that? By the way, did you see this tweet by Justin Trudeau? That he said, the soldiers who shared stories from the front lines of the war in Ukraine, he's referring to Ukrainian soldiers, thank you for your bravery, your strength, and your services. Canada is here for you.
No, we're not.
And we're going to provide support for mental health initiatives to help address the lasting impacts of the war. Right now, is our military reading this? They are furious. They only asked for 5% increase on their salaries. Meanwhile, he sent them over $1 billion already, and now he's sending them another $500 million package. Our military here in Canada is so demoralized right now, especially by your tweets like this, Justin Trudeau. You are, I don't know how to describe him, Glenn. How would you describe a person for doing stuff like this? Where our military, in terms of the mental health...
Traitor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's working for somebody else. Canadians hired this guy, they voted for this guy, hired this guy to work for the globalists, to send our dollars around the world, helping everywhere else, but actually harming everywhere else, taking a big kickback from him and the people who put him in power, which is not Canadians. And meanwhile, we have our military over here where so many men need help too for mental problems. But we don't have enough money for that. No, because we're sending it all over the world. That's none of our business. No foreign entanglements. We shouldn't be there. And he doesn't speak for all Canadians, okay? He's speaking for a very select group. These are the ones who are going to profit off of this military incursion in Ukraine and have been profiting for a while.
Well, we've been saying it that the war isn't there to actually protect Ukrainians or, their way of life. The war is actually to destroy Ukraine and destabilize Russia and Europe and that whole region. And also destabilize the, North America, including Canada and the United States. And it's already happening. They are using Ukrainians to attack Russia, but it's not the Americans that are dying. It's the Ukrainians that are dying, and it's the Russians that are dying. So, brothers and sisters, if any of you supporting this conflict, then you're like, oh, let's go kill the Russians, you're also supporting murder of Ukrainians. And there's a lot more. Actually, I saw the statistic, and a famous counteroffensive that's being prepared for months and months and months and being announced by Western counterparts, including Ukrainians, that at least 7,500 of Ukrainian soldiers have died so far in the recent weeks.
Yeah, champ, we've said it since the beginning. We should stop sending them weapons and money and all the BS that's going over there. We should send negotiators and peace initiative makers to sit everybody down at the table and say, let's put it out. Let's fix this, because just innocent people are being killed. Soldiers who are indoctrinated into a mind belief. They're giving up their life for what? For what purpose? Their belief is not the reality. That's why we call it an indoctrination.
Well, speaking of counteroffensive and all this assistance that are being sent. By the way, we played it in the last episode, Glenn, but I'll play it again. Let's watch this.
Soul of the American experience. Also today, we are announcing a new security assistance package to help meet Ukraine's security and defense needs. The package includes key capabilities such as Bradley.
Let's kill more Ukrainians. That's what you're saying.
Infantry fighting
vehicles. Thank you, Karine
Stryker
Saint-Jean.
Armored personnel carriers. Artillery rounds, Stinger anti-aircraft systems, Javelin anti-armor system, ammunition to U.S. provided high.
It's like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Taxpayers, you in for it. It's not free. You're paying for it.
And more than 22 million rounds of small arms ammunition to help Ukraine retake its sovereign territory.
Yeah.
The package also contains additional munition for.
What are the chances of them actually doing that?
She's also talking about the special munitions that the Americans want to send over, that they're a little bit atomic a little bit. It's a real word to say, where they would turn, if Ukraine would use a lot of that, it would turn Ukraine into a nuclear waste field.
Well, specifically, you're referring to the uranium depleted, right? Rounds. And this is, well, the British were the first one that did it. And remember that the Russians attacked the warehouse where they were stored in, and then they couldn't even send the firefighters to put it out because the fire was radioactive. And not an orange smoke that we had in New York.
It was radioactive too, it looked like.
That looked like as well. But the sending, and again, like, let's say, well, who is it going to harm? Is it going to harm Russians? You think Russians are not going to do the same thing again? Like the intelligence in Ukraine, you don't think there's Ukrainians are the ones who's selling intelligence to Russians? It's not that corrupt. Of course they are. So the Russians are going to find out which warehouse is stored. They're going to attack it again, and all this fallout from the uranium depleted armor rounds will affect who? The Ukrainians. So they're trying to kill more Ukrainians, and also they're trying to kill the land. Like if they actually use those uranium depleted rounds, what happens to all the fields where they grow like 30% of all the grain, world's grain, I think. What is it, 30 or 15%? Something, but still something really enormous.
And also to get rid of all the evidence.
Like what?
Well, all this so-called American military hardware going over to Ukraine to help out. I wonder if it's really that much, and this is why they want to have the Congress wants to have an audit to try and balance the figures to make sure that the numbers are actual. They probably say that they're sending a lot more than what they really are. And that is
pocketing the rest.
That's right. It's in
balancing the rest.
Valued in American dollars, obviously, and then they're able to launder it and then come back to the people who are all part of this globalist agenda.
Okay, let's watch the
for
rest
Ukraine's air defenses to help protect the Ukrainian people. This is the 40th drawdown of equipment from Department of Defense inventories using presidential drawdown authorities for Ukraine. And we appreciate the bipartisan support of Congress, which
all sellouts, bipartisan support, meaning like, oh, you blame the Democrats for no. The warmongers and industrial military complex sellouts are in both parties. So it's a uniparty, really. Like, and that's how you know it's a uniparty, because they all support it. And again, it's even here in Canada, between Trudeau and Pierre, they both support Ukraine. And I don't mean we shouldn't support Ukraine. Of course, we should support Ukrainian people, but against the Western world.
Has made this aid possible. The United States will continue to stand with the people of Ukraine as they courageously defend their sovereignty
and die.
Their democracy against Russia's aggression. Finally, today's CPI report shows
Okay, so Glenn, they are, the defending the democracy. What are they defending in Syria by having the military, U.S. military in Syria? What are they defending? Oil rigs. Oil rigs, by the way, is an essential part of Western democracy. So we need to protect that. And Burisma, and now we know Biden has been compromised by Burisma, which is the natural gas company of Ukraine. And the guy was so corrupt that he had to run away. He was a minister, ex-minister, he had to run away. He bought a Cyprus citizenship, and he ran away because, he was so corrupt. And, natural energy is an essential part of Western democracy. And that's what we're defending in Syria. And also that's what we're defending in Ukraine, because all those areas that have been taken over by Russians also are really full of minerals, things like coal.
Yeah, why should you increase the oil rig count in America to extract the oil when you can just send the military over in other countries and have it done so much? Like, they'd put the rigs there and we just steal their oil.
By the way, this is the famous counteroffensive. And, remember all those nations, including Germany, send the Leopard tanks and Abrams and Bradleys and all that stuff. This is and we show some footage. We show some footage of that a few episodes ago of the counteroffensive. And they're like, on unconfirmed reports, the BC reported unconfirmed reports that apparently that Ukraine took 3 villages back in this counteroffensive, but unconfirmed. And Zelensky cannot speak about it out loud, and he couldn't tell Justin what he brought $500 million worth of aid to help them. But this is the infamous military equipment. This is from the Twitter account. They showing destroyed or almost destroyed Ukrainian, Western supply Ukrainian equipment, which is Bradleys. This is Leopard. Something's working. He says, it's not really that scary. Glenn, what's up with the crosses on the side of the vehicle?
Yeah, hit here and the whole thing blows. They're actually putting a mark on it. But this big counteroffensive we've been hearing about, that it was supposed to be going on now for a while. We've been hearing it for a month. And what have they taken back? 3 villages.
But it's unconfirmed. We can't even say it. We can't even confirm if that's actually that's what happened. But
even if it was the truth, 3 villages.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth all the billions of dollars they invested into this. The point is, they are now. You can see the tendency now of the West, actually, with Tucker actually speaking up against it on Twitter, and other people start to address it, including other outlets, including us, right? We had Seymour Hersh do the whole special article, investigative journalism, very good one on Nord Stream, where he connected the dots and said why there's evidence that U.S. blew up the pipe. It was connection between all the phone calls and Liz Truss at the time making a call to the national security of United States. Did she call? Who did she call? I forgot. And say it's done. Like, so there's a lot of evidence of that. And then, but now they're saying Ukraine actually blew up the the Nord Stream. Glenn, why you think? Well, first of all, I don't have a memory of a goldfish, and I have read the report, and I watched Seymour Hersh's interviews throughout its time. Well, if you have forgotten, we'll remind you. Go look at it for yourself. But now, everywhere on the news, they're saying Ukraine blew up Nord Stream. Glenn, what's going on there?
Yeah, as Ukraine is losing the war, now the Americans are throwing Ukraine under the bus, and the media is coming out and said it's the Ukrainians who actually blew up Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 oil pipelines from Russia, supplying Europe with energy.
The Netherlands military intelligence. Yeah, military intelligence. That's an oxymoron, right? Learned from a source in Ukraine last year that Kiev was plotting to destroy the pipelines. Dutch state broadcaster NOS reported on Tuesday the MIVD then tipped off the CIA, which convinced Ukrainian operatives to abort the plan. The report continued. Okay, so that's really it is. Like, they knew they're gonna do it, and they couldn't stop them because Ukrainians are fearless.
Or maybe they said, "Okay, don't do it. We can do it better. Let us take care of it."
Clever. You know what's happening now too? People are definitely sick, and we cover in each episode that there's a disdain that grows in Europe, and with each week, with each day, with each month, that political powers to be, they actually start to listen to people, or people taking over the political structures, and they start to rebel against this ongoing slaughter of the way of life in Europe via this Ukrainian thing. And you can see it not only in Europe, you can see it throughout the world, is in the way people are reacting to the whole American dollar and the Western leadership. Now they are siding with organizations like BRICS. Now we have the news that Egypt wants to really enter the BRICS. And Egypt is not a small economy, Glenn.
No, by the way, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that term was first coined in, believe it or not, 2001. So it's 22 years ago.
So they've been preparing for this.
Yeah, and now we see big economies in the northern part of Africa want in on the deal. Now Egypt wants in, and that's one of many others who are going to be applying to be a part of the BRICS trade organization and having the trade being paid outside of U.S. dollars. So they're going to have their own currency exchange going on, which will render a lot of the world reserve currency, the U.S. dollar, the de facto petrodollar, a lot less powerful in the world.
Yeah, BRICS is pushing towards the trade in national currencies and has begun efforts to establish a joint payment network to cut reliance on Western financial system like SWIFT, for example, and particularly on the dollar. It has been gaining traction since the West imposed economic sanctions against Russia over its military operations in Ukraine. As a result of the restriction, Moscow was effectively cut off from the Western banking system and saw billions in its assets frozen and seized abroad. So people don't want to be, like, if they become a next enemy or next target, not an enemy, a next target. It's like, oh, well, like pyramids in Egypt, I'd like to have it as my, I don't know, this will be my next resort. And let's come up with some kind of thing. They are evil there and the terrorists, let's take over. And maybe they'll discover a new oil field somewhere by accident in the Sahara. So the point is, people are taking preemptive strikes, or they're actually starting to understand that, that the world is changing and they want to join the other leadership. It's actually funny that, who else wants to join the BRICS?
France under Mr. Macron. Surprisingly, since he grew up in was a member of the Rothschild Bank in France, and now he became the leader of France. Not a very popular leader lately with all the rioting going on. But now even him, he wants to be a part of the BRICS summit. In other words, that would be the first time that any one of the G7 countries would be a part of the BRICS. But Mr. Ramaphosa of South Africa, he doesn't seem to be too receptive on the idea, big guy.
Well, Africans don't really like French colonizers and what they do with the resources and the people in France. So, especially Macron, screw that person, you know. Unfortunately, he is a victim of pedophilia. He was pedophiled by his now wife in school. I don't know if you guys know the story. Look into it by yourself. She was definitely older than him. And she is older than him now. And you can see like, oh, wow, what's the age difference and why? Well, that's why she was his like high school sweetheart, except she was also his teacher. True story, by the way, Glenn. True story.
Doesn't surprise me. So many of these leaders at the top, they're weird.
Well, that's how MK Ultra works, right? So he was compromised because he was traumatized by his now wife. Back then, she was his sexual abuser, and because of this trauma, his brain was compartmentalized, and you know the people, globalists, knew how to use it against him. And yeah, that's
was she a teacher on gender studies?
She is now. You know, she looks like transgender.
Good luck to him or her, whatever you want to call they, them.
Yeah, well, and I guess we're going to close the story. But by the way, brothers and sisters, all this divide and conquer stuff is a feeder. 100%, and we're here not upset. We're here to unite you all together, and for you to recognize that all of those things are divisive for a reason. Men versus women, Polish versus Russians, and Ukrainians versus Russians, West versus East, West versus black versus white, men versus women, woman versus transgender. Whatever, you choose your battles, but don't battle, don't fight. Unite. Let's unite against the common enemy, who are the globalists. And we'll actually do the episode on the globalist on Friday, I believe. And who's in charge of all this? You know, we always talk about who are the captors and who are the slave owners, so to speak. You know, who are the top 1% of the 1%, right? But the idea is, why it's a feeder? Because Polish, as much as they are supporting Ukraine, as much as they hate Russia and all that stuff, and how much they're vocal against the Russian aggression in Ukraine, just like the rest of the Western world, they're still buying Russian oil, Glenn. It's not funny.
Well, Poland, they need energies too, and they're looking at some of the neighbors in the European countries, and they're saying, no, we're going to stick with this. And, you know, the Prime Minister of Poland, he's actually defending against the euro, the fact that they are still purchasing large amounts of Russian oil.
Oh, yeah, the energy, Orleans, firm Orleans, Orlen, I guess, Orlen, he's defending them. He's defending specifically their move to increase shipments of Russian oil this month, despite Warsaw's tough stance on abandoning imports from Russia. The outlet notes from Poland reported on Monday. You know, so it is a feeder, brothers and sisters. And we have actors in this feeder like Zelensky. We have actors in this feeder like Trudeau. And all the Western leaders, they are just acting out the role. They're not the decision makers. They are puppets. It's a Muppet puppet feeder. They're not even actors. They are puppets. Someone's hand up their bottoms, which is actually probably accurate description of most leaders nowadays, including Macron and Trudeau. And they probably enjoy it very much. Specifically Trudeau, because, you know, he's the spokesperson for the globalists concerning the, what do they call it? LGBTQ to SL plus alphabet thing going on, right? I wasn't bad with that, was I? Nothing to be proud of on my end here. But you know, all of those, what do you say, like gay BCs? Brothers and sisters, whatever you choose to be today, you are free to be. But make sure it's your free, conscious choice. And that's your one right that nobody can take away from you, is your free will. you're free to freedom. And if it's a conscious and free choice, but not some choice that is forced, like Larry Pink tells you to do, if it's not a forced behavior, because forced behavior is not a free choice. It's a forced choice. If you're free to choose whoever you want to be that. But make sure it's a free choice. Glenn, we're closing the show. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, brother, a little small rant from the G-Man. All these troubles in the world, and they keep going on, they're more predominant in the Anglo-American Empire and the Commonwealth countries. I find also in those countries, the men have been emasculated, or they're distracted with dummy stuff. They're too enthralled with, they work a 40-hour work week, and then they're too tired to do anything else. Then on the weekends, they beer up, junk up on food, and then get distracted by watching sporting events and this and that, as long as they're in their little comfortable bubbles. Well, that's not why you were put here. I expect my brothers to start learning what's really going on. Open up your eyes. Get better at discernment, making yourself a better man, making yourself a better provider for your family. We're all going to unite together, and we'll start stamping down on all this craziness that's happening around the world, where money is being taken away, laundered, the elites running everything. There's a saying that evil only prevails when good men do nothing. But how could you be a good man if you're doing nothing? I empower my brothers to come up to become good men again and start doing something. Let's unite the right. I don't mean the right side, the right, the opposite of the wrong, and let's win this game together.
Glenn, thank you for this. Thank you for tuning in, brothers and sisters. We'll see you on the next one. And I'll see you in the church on Sunday.